Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show, the Stacking Days podcast, episode 25. This is really an exciting moment. When I first started recording Stacking Days, or thought about recording Stacking Days, rather, my hope was that if I could just record 5 episodes, then I would have felt accomplished in my goal of putting the show out into the world. So, sitting here at 25 episodes in, about to embark on another really great conversation, with someone who is, a person of color, unapologetically open about their sobriety. I just feel extremely blessed to be able to do this. It's been a fantastic project to be a part of. So it's a little kind of unorthodox in the intro. I wanted to give all the listeners out there a quick heads up in that I will be taking a few weeks away from the mic, spending time with family, enjoying the rest of the summer. And we will be back with new episodes in September. So don't go too far. We'll be back recording shortly. And again, like I said, we'll have new episodes that are going to be going live in September. So for those of you who follow the show, you know that this is, something that we do and release on a weekly basis. But we're going to take a few weeks hiatus as we get some really exciting things actually in order for, I guess, what we could call season 2 of the Stacking Days podcast. Some great guests that are already lined up to go. And I'm really excited about it. So thank you for being with us for the conversation and the ride up until now, and we will see you in a few weeks. And with that, enjoy the show. This is the Stacking Days podcast, the podcast about the healing experience of recovery for people of color by people of color. This show is for the purpose of education and connection and is not a replacement for therapy or recovery care. We suggest you seek out the support of a trained professional for guidance with your specific circumstance. I'm your host, Ray Donovan, and I've been alcohol-free since September 2021. Welcome to the show. Hey guys, welcome back to the Stacking Days podcast. We got another really exciting conversation today. I've been following this brother for some time now, and I feel like he's going to have a lot to be able to share with us from the standpoint of what's worked for him to get to where he is today. So without further ado, I want to invite Charles Harriso Jr. to the mic. Charles, welcome to the Stacking Days podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on here, be able to share my story with everyone. It's been a journey, and just happy to be here.
Yeah, I bet it has been a journey. I mean, as it is for all of us. Maybe we can just start, by telling the audience just a little bit about yourself. Where you're from, maybe how old you are. I don't know. What do you do for for fun? What do you do for a living? And then we'll just jump right into it from there.
All right. Well, I'm 46 years old. I'm a postal employee. Been a postal employee for about 20 years. Which I'll get into more about that in my story, but it has like a segment. I had 2 different careers at the post office because of my drinking. What I do for fun, I'm always in the gym. I love going to the gym, working out, and it's just that's part of my sober story is going to the gym. If I'm not in the gym, usually I'm working on videos, making content. That's like become pretty much my life hobby. It's been a lot just doing that. People like to say, "Why are you always working?" But it's not for me. It's not work. It's a passion now. I discovered a new passion just by going on Instagram, and I just love doing it. And it's always something with sobriety or just motivating people. Or I take my camera to the gym, record myself in the gym, and it's a big passion. And other than that, time with family, as much as possible. I have a 2-year-old granddaughter, and she keeps, she's always exciting, be around her. And you might hear her occasionally in the background if she runs down the hall. I'm trying to stay as far away from the living room, but occasionally she'll run down the hall and you hear some little feet, or a scream or something. But yeah, just family,
that's all good, man. We love the kids here, so that's all good.
But yeah, I try to surround myself with sobriety. I still go out occasionally. I like to do karaoke, and that's something that like changed since I got sober because karaoke bar is alcohol, but I had to learn to do it without alcohol. So that's another thing. Singing. Occasionally, I'll post a video at karaoke singing because that was a big struggle
Okay,
also.
cool. I appreciate you sharing all that. So let's just jump right into it and rewind the clock back. I want to start with where your relationship with alcohol started. Kind of what do you think was your driver and what brought you into that space, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, my earliest, when I first started drinking, and I kind of use that loosely, but it started out when I was maybe as young as a toddler, getting sips from adults.
Mm,
My whole family, everybody drinks. Friday nights, my dad would have uncles over and everybody over, and I would, get sips of beer from them. And the crazy part about it, most other kids would be like, "Oh, that's disgusting." They might try it because they see the adults doing it. But for me, it's like it instantly took on. I went from that to later on. Once I got a little bit older, to sneaking it. They would leave their glass or cup behind, and I would go behind them and drink it. And like
mm,
that just carried on. And like looking back, that was the first, my first experience with alcohol. Um, and it carried on. It's like I would go through still like sneaking it. I couldn't say a regular drinker growing up, but it was just, whenever they would drink, I would go ask for a sip. Other kids, they would be cool with just playing. I would be like, let me get a sip of beer. And it carried on. But when I really, really started drinking, probably was about 13, eighth grade, getting ready to go into high school. And I have three older sisters, and they were already in their late teens. One was maybe like 21. So they were already drinking, getting alcohol. And I would hang
mm,
out with them. And then the main reason why I would drink when I would go with them is because it would like give me that courage. I would just feel like I was part of the group, and I would be more boisterous, talk, joke, because I'm normally a shy, quiet person. But as soon as I
mm,
get that first drink, it's like, oh, I can be whoever I want to be. And it's just like, I just loved that feeling when I first started. It's like, okay, I didn't want to be my regular self, quiet when I go to school. But when I hang out with my sisters and I get that drink, I'm wide open. And it was just, I got that idea reinforced because people would be like, oh, he's so cool. And they would see me without drinking. What's wrong with him? They would think,
mm,
okay, is he sad or something, think something's wrong, but that's me. I'm normally a quiet, shy person, but they were so used to seeing me, with my sisters drinking that when they see me with my parents or somebody, they would just like something's wrong. And that
mm,
same attitude, it just continued all through high school the same way. I would never, whenever I would go somewhere, hang out, I would try to find some way to get a drink. And in those years, it's hard, to get alcohol. You'd have to go pay somebody or something like that. But I would always find a way. It just, it was just crazy how, I was so single-mindedly looking for alcohol before I was able to go do something. We would go to the skating rink. I got to find a way to get a drink, or otherwise, I feel like I wouldn't go have fun. I wouldn't even try to see if I could have fun without it. I was just so used to that. And that continued on up until I started going to college and getting my first job and moving out the house with my parents. I was still same attitude. Like we had in our earlier conversation, go on dates. I needed to go on dates. Just funny thinking about if I would do something like this, a podcast, I would try to have a drink before then back then. It's just so crazy. And I was thinking about that earlier because I was getting that nervous feeling. And I was like, oh, that's like, something back then I would have had to have a drink. It just shows how far along, we've come in this journey. But yeah, and it's, just going through all of that, it was just like, I would never think, okay, that's the problem. I didn't think about that part as being a problem that I need to work on myself. I'll just think, okay, that's just me, that's just life. And I accepted it for so long until I started stacking up all this other stuff that was going on while I was drinking. Every time I would, drink, or I wouldn't say every time I would drink, but every time I would get in trouble, I was drinking. And started getting DUIs, going out, drinking, and drive home. Wouldn't even remember coming home. And, you get away with it so much that you don't think about it when you're doing it. But then it's that one time you get pulled over, and it's happened to me. I got three different DUIs, um, And the
Mm.
first one I remember, I was living in a town, it's area called Augusta. It's like an hour away from where I worked. And so I would go out and drive an hour home. But one night I went out with coworkers and I had an hour long drive and I was sloppy drunk. I didn't make it out the parking lot good. I got out the parking lot and
Mm.
I was supposed to turn. I went straight across the highway, and then I turned, and the policeman was coming, and he saw me and pulled me over. And that was like my first like real like warning because I was like, okay, I got arrested less than 5 minutes away from the club, and I was about to make an hour long drive. I mean, he basically saved my
Yeah.
life. It was no way I was gonna make it.
Right.
And that was like my first experience with actually trying to stop. I was like, okay, I got to do better. I can't, can't go through this. I can't do that again. And I might stop for about 2 months. And as most people, when they stop drinking, they get the idea, well, maybe it wasn't so much of an addiction problem or being an alcoholic or anything like that. Maybe I just need to drink smarter. So I decided I was going to drink smarter. I was going to just, instead of drinking and driving, I was going to make sure if I go somewhere, I'm going to always have a driver. That works. I mean, it might work for a couple of years. I think it worked for a couple of years for myself. But it comes times where, okay, you don't have a driver and you be like, well, I'm not going to drink so much. And after the first drink, the deal's off with how much I'm going to drink. I'm going to keep drinking. Got another DUI, similar situation. Didn't even make it close to home, whatever, wrecked and went to jail. And I'll say, this time, okay, I'm going to have to stop. I can't keep going to jail. I was lucky to get my license back the first time. And it was just the process. It's just like it just went over again. I did the same thing, stopped for about a few months, convinced myself that I could find a way to drink smarter. And as time went on, you had Uber and all that stuff. So I was like, okay, well, cool. I can definitely beat it now. And it was always me beating the legal issues, not beating the problem in myself of just why I had to drink in the first place. I was just, I'm
Yeah.
going to find a way to drink. It was that so important that I'm going to find a way. And I just kept going with it. I kept going, you know, another DUI, and the crazy thing about it is like in my state, in South Carolina, is like DUI is kind of it should be, people always talk about how bad it is, but it's kind of easy to beat in South Carolina, which is a shame. Now looking back at the time, I was just like fortunate, but I was getting arrested for DUI, but I would never get convicted of it. I would
Mm.
go through the process, and by the time I go to court, talk to the officer, and he would reduce the charges to something else, reckless driving or something. So I never actually had a
Mm.
DUI conviction, even though I was getting arrested for it. Sometimes I would blow, and it still. So it's just like the legal issue still wasn't enough, and it persisted on. Eventually, it got to the point where I lost my job because I was the type that I would go out next morning, supposed to go to work, and call out, and I would have so much anxiety and guilt after that. It's like I wouldn't go back to work the next day. And then I would just continue missing work. And I would do that like maybe sometimes I would take a whole month off because of one
Mm.
call out, because I would feel so much anxiety and I would just stay home and drink. Stay home and drink. Then finally I might, build up the nerve to go back. But eventually they got tired of me and said, let me go. And after that I really, really got like just kind of terrible with it. I just kind of accepted, okay, I'm gonna be dysfunctional alcoholic, and I didn't really care too much about it. I filed for disability and everything, and I was just like, resign my fate of just being a drunk. I was like, I'll collect disability, so I don't have to worry about no job, and I'll catch rides because at that point I didn't have a license for a while because of my last DUI, and I had got into an accident, didn't have insurance, so still paying for that now, but I just ended up losing my license
Mm.
like long term. But and I went through that, and through all that craziness, I managed to get married, relationship, and it was like it was, I was kind of really up and down in my relationships at the time. Like I would be great when I wasn't drinking, sometimes still cool when I'm drinking, but it just get those little crazy arguments or just those one nights, and it would just like tear the relationship apart for months on, at a time. But eventually, my ex-wife, she got tired of it. She got tired of me not trying to do anything, crazy arguments over stuff that I wouldn't even remember the next day. I wouldn't even, some days we would go out and be drinking, and like the next day she's upset, and I have no idea why. I was like, what happened? What's wrong with you? And she's telling me everything I did. And I was like, oh, wow, and it was crazy, that I did that and just kind of just more just blamed her. I was like, well, you want to go out drinking in the first place. It was never
Right.
me. And it continued. It's just like crazy. So I, I eventually got my job back at the post office while I was still drinking. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do better, but I'm gonna still hold on to this alcohol. And it was just weird, just like I could see myself like doing the same things over and over again. And finally, it's like one day, it's like I woke up and it was just like I looked in the mirror and it's like this picture I saw was just like crazy. I was just like, why in the world am I continuing to do this? It's like I was fortunate enough to get my job back. I have a place to stay. I haven't got kicked out of this last place where I'm at, and I'm about to fall, totally off. I know a lot of people say you got to hit rock bottom, but I was like, I didn't want to hit rock bottom. It was just to the point to where, you know, I didn't want to go there. And I called a friend of mine and I told her, I was like, I need to tell somebody. So I told her and she was like, yes, you most definitely. She said, I see it. I don't say nothing, but I definitely think you need to get some help. And
Mm.
I told my sister, I said, I need to tell somebody closer. So, it can kind of hold me to it because I would say it to myself sometimes and then the next day be like, no, I need to go to work. So, and my work is more important, which is, I have so many people that I talk to on a daily basis on Instagram, and they'll tell me the same excuse. They'll be like, well, I can't do it because of my job. And I was like, well, eventually you're going to lose your job if you don't. But
Hmm.
so I just went ahead and locked it in. I told my sister that, that I'm going to go ahead and get some help. It was a Sunday, and she was like, yes, you definitely do. She was like, you talk to mom because my sister and my mom both are mental health nurses, so they deal with a
Okay.
lot of people with alcoholism. They seen patients, and so talked to my mom. And the next day we were calling places. We found one in Columbia, and they were able to get me in on Tuesday. So of course I had to get my last day of drinking in on that Monday, and
Yeah.
so, but even then it was like I didn't feel like I got drunk. It was just I don't know. It was just alas, I don't know. It didn't benefit me. It didn't do anything. It wasn't like, oh, I'm glad I got that in. It was just so when hear people say that, I'd be like, it's not gonna help you. But it's quicker. It's better just to go ahead and move ahead with it. But I did, and
Yeah. You're just
once I got
trying to hold on to the relationship a little bit
yeah,
longer.
one last last hurrah. But luckily, it wasn't so much that I didn't get in there the next day. Stayed in the detox of like 7 days because I was like went in on Tuesday, and normally I think they keep about 4 or 5 days, but it was going into the weekend. It's like, well, you might as well stay until Monday. So I stayed till Monday. After that, they got me into IOP, which is intensive outpatient program. And in that program, that's where I really like got like tools and the resources. Just learn how to like really open up and talk to others about it. Because we would go in there, we would sit in the class. There'd be about seven of us round table, and first thing we had to do was exchange numbers, and we had to check in with three people every day. It could be text message, call, but you had to just communicate to that person and just tell them something about your day, and that was every day. And it kind of got me into that habit of doing it. They also required us to go to AA, which was cool because at first when I went to AA, I think AA kind of like it kind of made me kind of back away from it. I didn't really like the idea of a sponsor because at that time I wasn't open to being opening up with people. So
Yep.
when I got to the point to where I was like, oh, I needed a sponsor, I just like stopped going. But I went in with an open mind, and this time I never did get a sponsor either. But I did go because it was just good to hear the stories and to be able to just to share in the group setting. But it was in 2020, so as soon as I started, everything shut down. I think that
Hmm.
was in February. It was February of 2020, and like here, it shut down. Everything shut down sometime in March. So I managed to get through my whole IOP program before everything shut down. But as far as meetings,
That's good.
that was pretty much everything was online. But which was cool, the online thing like really exploded, Zoom and all that. And so I was able to just go to different groups. Some was AA, some was just I think Sober Grid. I went to them a lot, and I just got in the habit of just like talking to others on the groups and just listening. I would be at work and I have my headphones on and just listen. I wouldn't even contribute, but I would listen. And that was like the early building blocks. It was like you said in our earlier conversation, you just was trying to get everything to get those days in. It was basically building strength. I started
Yeah.
going to the gym. Um, I changed my diet like completely. And I mean, it was like a total transformation. I was like, I want to do everything. It was like, I didn't want to like leave any stone uncovered. It was like, there was nothing too much that I couldn't do for my sobriety. It's like, okay, somebody said that's a good idea to do for sobriety. It's like, I'm gonna try it, it was like, I didn't want to shut out anything that could possibly help. And the gym was like probably one of the big things for me though. It was just going there because I always liked working out. I played football in high school, and so working out was a big part of my life. But it was just when I was drinking, I could never sustain anything. It would be like go to the gym one week, then next week I'm hanging out partying, then maybe get back to it. But this time it stuck, and when I actually started on Instagram, I was more like doing fitness stuff. I still wasn't so open like just to post a whole lot of stuff about sobriety. I would maybe throw it in every now and then, but I wasn't
Hmm.
really posting it all the time. It wasn't like, okay, it's just a sober page. It's more of a fitness page by a person that happens to be sober. But as I got more comfortable, most of my videos became more about sobriety and less about fitness. But that's another part that helped me though, just sharing and people like sending me messages and like telling me that that inspired them, talking to people. Um, it's like just having a community. I mean, I see that part of AA that they always preach is helping others. It's a big part of staying sober, and it's really rang true for me. When I'm helping somebody else, I'm probably helping myself way more. It's a two-way street with it.
Yeah. I was going to ask, I mean, I have so many questions. Thank you for sharing all of that. That's a really good, perspective to have on what you've been through to get to where you are today. And I really do appreciate the share out. And I have a lot of questions that I want to get into. For one that just kind of like stood out to me is you mentioned that your mom and your sister are both mental health nurses, but even in their professional state, they didn't feel comfortable bringing what they believed and saw in you to the conversation. Now that you're 3 years into your sobriety, when you talk to your mom and your sister about where you were at, what does that conversation look like now? Being that they are probably sitting there having this conversation, maybe even between the two of them, but they weren't bringing it to you, and you were deteriorating, essentially right in front of them.
Um, my understanding now from talking to them is more of they knew it, they knew it that I need help, but it's kind of like, they know that I wasn't going to get that help until I was ready.
Yeah.
Um, because we do talk about it, because I have an older sister. My oldest sister, she's still out drinking, and it's more people who don't deal with the mental health and alcoholism that tries more like they try more, they try to push her to go to get treatment. But like my mom, my sister, they know, that it's not a whole lot that you can do. You can lead them to the water, but until they're ready to drink, it's not gonna stick because I talked to
Yeah.
my sister a little bit, but when you're in the program, it's not, you can only just, show them how you're doing, you know, but you
Yeah.
can't really make them.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, that's not surprising to me, and I respect that obviously, and also know that unless you're ready to get into this thing and take on this monster yourself. I mean, it doesn't matter if you have a world renowned specialist standing right next to you. It's probably your success is going to be limited by your desire to overcome. So I totally get that. So you've had 3 DUIs. You lost your job. You got your job back. You were married. You lost your wife, the marriage, so to speak. At what point in time at any point in that time did you recognize that you had a legitimate issue, or were you just essentially trying to avoid the consequences that came with your drinking, but didn't think that the drinking was actually a problem for you?
Ooh, it's crazy. I would go back and forth with it. Sometimes I would be like, I do have an issue, but I would always say, but I can deal
Hmm.
with it this way. And like I say, I would work harder on avoiding the consequences instead of dealing with the issue that I knew that I had. I just felt like I can handle it. I was always thinking, okay, I could be a smart drinker. All I got to do is just not drive or whatever. And I wasn't thinking so much about the more of the relationship issues and stuff. I always felt like, okay, well, I can work that out some other way. I wasn't as concerned about those as I was with the legal issues. Now looking back,
Right.
I'm like, you know, that should have been enough. The relationship issues should have been enough to say, hey, it's a problem. But it was always avoiding the issues.
Yeah. No, I sense that. I was just curious because I feel like in having these conversations, and also my personal experience has been, I mean, I enjoyed drinking, at the time. And, but what I didn't enjoy was the negative consequences that, would come with it. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of negative consequences that come with abusing alcohol. Um, and there was a period where I was like, as long as I can just avoid all the rest of this shit, like I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing. I just got to a point where I clearly saw that I'm not going to be able to avoid these consequences anymore. You get to a point where it's almost inevitable that, 9 times out of the 10 times that you're drinking, something is going to happen that isn't going to serve you in your life. Right. And, potentially put you in a real compromise spot. So I totally get that, man. You also mentioned something else around how, and you did mention this. You said, we were talking about earlier before we started recording, the similarity that we have is that we would drink for all occasions, right? Whether you're going to, the barbecue or out at night or, out on a date or, so on and so forth. And then you said, the podcast that we were getting on at one point in time would have been one of those experiences where you might have had to take the edge off some, I get that. Totally get that. I'm also, I think, naturally an introverted person. So I oftentimes would like turn to alcohol just to kind of, loosen me the hell up so that I could, at the time thinking I could show up, knowing that it's completely, a misplaced logic. But so what do you do today now to kind of fortify yourself? Obviously, the bottle is no longer a tool for you. What do you do today in order to maintain, yourself in situations where, aren't naturally comfortable for you?
Ooh, it's a mental struggle. It's like almost I try to prepare myself as much as possible. Um, yeah, I do. I go through my mind. I'm like, okay, getting ready for this, and it's like, but it's just like a lot of things that I would shy away from. I just jump into it. I'd like being on video. That was like, ooh, I would never do that. But it's just like, okay, just do it, And the more you do it, you get comfortable. You get more comfortable with it. Um, and and I've learned, like if I'm out in situations, like especially if I'm hanging out with my sister or something, and there's a lot of drinking around, and I'm quiet, and it's like I've learned to be more comfortable just being myself. It's like I realize I don't have to be the one that's always talking. I don't have to be cracking jokes because then I look back, I'm like, I wasn't even funny then. I was more obnoxious. I thought I was being charming and stuff, but I wasn't. And it's just
Hmm.
more of being acceptance of yourself, and being like, okay, I don't have to, be the loud one. Because back then I would be like, if I'm not drinking, I'd be like, wow, I'm just being boring. It's like somebody's looking at me. They're probably wondering what's wrong with him. And
Hmm.
I had to get my mind out of that and realize that, people are not nobody's paying attention to me being quiet. And it gets better after so long. You do it more and more often. I think it's just time and it's just, practice for me.
Yeah, it's fun. It's like going to the gym and working the muscles, right? Like when you first go into the gym, you're not lifting the big weights. You're not, pushing a lot of repetitions because your body is just not accustomed to it. And I feel like fortifying yourself and being able to walk through life, at least in my experience, not drinking also takes a great deal of repetition, a great deal of exposure because I mean, and if you're like me, where I was drinking for decades, there were a lot of things that I was not used to doing without what I thought was the crutch and, the support of alcohol. So I hear you on that. And, it's challenging. I feel like in the early days, to do it. It sounds like you had a lot of kind of foundational pieces in play with the programs that you're with. What support did you have or turn to past your outpatient program? And maybe I don't know if you were consistent with AA or if you kind of stopped doing that in an early stage in your sobriety. But what did you turn to help fortify you so that you could, show up and get those repetitions in your sober life so you could get to where you are today?
Um, the AA, it did help a lot. Like I said, during that early time, it was COVID, so it did shut down. But having those Zoom meetings were really like cool because it was like I didn't have to actually go there. I didn't even have to like, stand up or say my name, and I can just listen and just to hear all these
Hmm.
different stories, stuff that I've done from other people, and just see that it's like it's possible to live a sober life, and just to see that other people are going through it. So it was like I was kind of like in the middle of everything, and I kept always kept sobriety on my mind. It was like it just became a big part of my life. Um, but as far as like I don't know, just like fortifying, that was a big part of it. And then I have like a supportive friend who was just she was really like we were like dating before I went into detox. But after we came out, we just decided to be really good friends. And so I would ask her like I'd really want to do karaoke, but I need somebody to go with me. And she doesn't drink much, so it was like she wasn't like the party type person. So it was like it was really cool just to have a person who understand what I was going through that would hang out with me, and she understood if I was like, okay, I'm ready to go. We only stayed for a couple hours or whatever, sing a song, and she was cool with it. It was like, oh, she was never the type of person that would like pressure me to like stay late or anything like that. So just having
Hmm.
good friend close to me that can help me with that too.
That's awesome. I mean, you always hear that, community is so important in trying to maintain sobriety. And sometimes community is just that one person, as opposed, and in my case, my community was a lot of the podcasts that I was listening to in some ways, just,
Hmm.
um, and in hearing that, and you were talking earlier about how initially in your early days of sobriety for some time you weren't very open and vocal, at least outwardly, about what you were pursuing, the sobriety that you were pursuing, the healing, the development that you were pursuing. Seems as though you had some close knit folks that were in tight with you. What was the turning point for you to start being more open about your journey, on certainly on social media, and then ultimately sounds just like in your day-to-day life? Because it sounds like you were pretty private about this transition that you were going through, even
Hmm.
though it was a complete overhaul, all aspects of your life, where someone who's looking at you could say like, oh wow, Charles is certainly doing some things differently here. But what was the turning point for you to say, you know what, I'm no longer going to keep this a secret? This is something that I'm going to step into, fully, and let folks know where I'm coming from.
The turning point was it was more of just I guess adding more people to that circle that knew what I was doing, and it was just getting their acceptance. Like if I would maybe say something, say okay, I'm at 90 days or something, and I get the congratulations, or maybe be bold and just post something, and just like the feedback I was getting was like oh wow, people are supportive of this, and it usually be like, especially early on, I'll maybe post something on my Facebook or something, and someone hit my inbox and be like, you know what, I'm glad you posted that because I've been thinking about, the same thing myself. And I was like, oh wow, that kind of hit home. I didn't imagine that just me saying that I'm hitting 90 days or 6 months would help someone else. Because I don't think that I had that, or I don't remember seeing that. On my timeline, somebody getting sober and me thinking that hey, I can do it also. But yeah, it was just slowly but surely everybody just people who are supportive of me, and saying it loud and giving pats on the back. That just made me show it's nothing to hide. And it was just I think it helped me to get that people saying that okay, you're doing something good, nothing to be ashamed of. And I was thinking back, at times before when I didn't when I did try to stop drinking and I was like always, hiding it or whatever, I would go somewhere and be like, oh, I'm on medication or I can't drink right now. I'm on a diet or something. And it was just, to me, it seems like,
Hmm.
that didn't work before. So maybe I need to really, just let them know, why I'm doing this, why I'm not drinking tonight. It's not, just a temporary thing. And I see now, yeah, it helps so much more, and so much more freedom. It's like a weight off your back when people know that you're sober. They know why you're doing it, and I don't have to worry about people asking me, "Hey, you want to go out to drink or not?" It's I kind of just made it easier for myself. I didn't realize it when I was hiding it, but it is easier once you get it out.
Yeah, I found the same thing. I mean, it's really challenging to get to that point where pull down the armor and expose yourself. I mean, I was always very I don't know, maybe afraid is the word of being vulnerable, being afraid of being exposed. And to your point earlier, I just kind of like pushed through it and did it, even though it was uncomfortable in many different ways. To the surprise of a lot of folks. But at the same time, in doing that, every time you put it out there, it's almost like you get filled up just that much more, and you get that much more strength to continue to move forward. So I hear you, man, on that, 100%. I was going to ask you also, what do you think some of the misconceptions people have about sobriety? There are certain aspects of this lifestyle, and life choice that some people have to make and others make by choice. But what do you think some of the misconceptions people have who are sitting there, saying to themselves that, this is something that I maybe think about doing for myself, but I'm not sure of it yet. You think there's anything that holding folks back from taking that step? Like one of them that I often hear is that, like, I'm not going to be fun, anymore if I'm not drinking, which, obviously is not accurate. What do you think some others are that you've experienced in your time in your community?
Definitely the not fun. That's I think that's the biggest one. I mean, that I can think of. People just thinking that their life won't be the same. They thinking that they can't, do the same things they used to. And I tell them, that you have to really evaluate your life if you need a substance to have fun. It's probably something else, going on if you can't learn to have fun without it. Um,
Mm,
I mean, that's like the big block. A lot of people. I mean, that's like the last thing they're always holding on to. And I know that was something I held on to. I was just like always feeling like, okay, I still got so much more living to do. And I was like, and I can't do it without my drink. And I think a
right.
lot of people they think, okay, you gotta be older or you gotta be old before you stop drinking. They think, it's something, they think that they got too much life to live to give up that one thing. But I was like, you gain so much more without it, and it's like you experience things differently. You don't, when you're out somewhere and you see stuff going on like at the club or something, you're just like, wow, did I used to do that? You're like, was that fun? So it's like you really, I don't know, it's like you not looking down, but you just kind of you just like, whew, I'm glad I made that decision. But yeah, for me, I think it's the fun. People think that it's boring. They think that they can't live their whatever quote life of fun without having alcohol. Yeah,
Mm.
that's the big one for me.
I think folks also have to have like a broader, definition of like what's fun to them. I don't know. For me, I've kind of exposed myself to things, at least in a sober, state and sobriety, that I would have never done, maybe prior to, and I found them pretty enjoyable. So it just may happen that being in the club until 4 o'clock in the morning might not necessarily be fun to you anymore. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And that's okay, because if you sit there long enough, you see enough of the stupid shit that's happening around you. You're just like, maybe this is not where I need to be. It's
Exactly.
not it's not filling me up anymore. Um, I was gonna say, I am curious. What have been some of the biggest challenges that you've experienced in your kind of more recent sobriety? So, I'm coming up on 2 years in September. You've been sober for 3. What are some of the more challenging things that you've experienced, in your recent sobriety versus, what you experienced in early sobriety? Because I'm hoping things get easier. So that's basically what I'm trying to get at right now. What are you experiencing in your journey today that's still challenging for you that you're taking it one day at a time to get over?
I think it's just the normal life stressors, which will never go away. But it's just I still like I've been like. it's just far as like normal life stressors. They still come at you, as far as like paying bills. And I think that's, but that guess that doesn't really relate so much to my current state. It's just more of just this stuff that's always going to occur. But it's just, it always every now and then that thought will come back and be like, oh Lord, why I'm doing all of this. Especially, sometimes I fill my plate up with too much as far as like
Mm,
trying to do all these videos. At one point, I was posting 3 shorts a day, and I would try to
mm,
post one long form video on YouTube a week. And it was just, but I had to, say, okay, I take a step back, rest, but not quit. And it's just, I'm just, maturing in my sobriety and knowing that, okay, I don't have to keep pushing myself to stay sober. I can relax, and still maintain my sobriety and still help people without, burning myself out. But
yeah.
it's just, just becoming more comfortable with yourself, because I think a big part of us, when you be in early sobriety, you want to just kind of keep running, 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 and you're not even, it's like you just kind of bare knuckle, and you don't want to take a chance of falling back into an old lifestyle. So you really push
Yeah.
yourself a little too much. And I think later in sobriety, I've learned to be more comfortable and be like, hey, I'm not gonna relapse just because I'm not staying busy every day or just always doing something.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. I think that's really important. Like folks got to take a step back sometimes to continue to take those steps forward, right?
Hmm.
That makes total sense. What a couple more questions that I have for you as we kind of get to the end of our time here. One is, what was a kind of a milestone that you hit that was just so incredibly fulfilling for you in your sober journey? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a milestone of, hitting a certain amount of days or a certain amount of time, but and it could just be something, completely unremarkable to other people necessarily, right? Like, what is there something that happened in your sobriety where, it just wouldn't have been the case, had you have not been pursuing this lifestyle?
I think with me is as far as like with my fitness journey is like when I've like got to the point to where I was like, wow, I made a real transformation. And I remember like all the summers and springs, I would be like, we go to the beach or whatever, and I'd be like, next year I'm going, I'm going to be able to take my shirt off and feel comfortable. But it was like I would never do it.
Mm,
I would never get to that point because continually drink through the year. I would never like be able to like actually accomplish goals. And when I got to the point, and even when I was like, yeah, I had to really stop and look, because I would always be like never satisfied with where I'm at. But it's like I look back and I was like, wow, I've made a big difference, at this older age that I could never do in my 20s or 30s, which was remarkable for me because it's like that's the years when I could have, I had more energy, more testosterone and everything. But it's like I couldn't do it because of the alcohol. But since I got sober, it's like I did it in like 6 months. When before I was always
mm,
giving myself a year, next year I'm gonna do this, whatever. But it was like in 6 month time. It was like that really showed me like, wow, the stuff that I can accomplish, you know, in 6 months of being sober, is like it take a lifetime drinking, when I was drinking.
hmm That's awesome. For those, and we'll have Charles share what his handles and all that later. But check him out. I mean, the brother's made. He's not pulling our chain here. I mean, he's made some significant strides. In his health. So I mean, shout out to you on that. I think you're an inspiration from that standpoint for sure. Two last questions that I want to ask as we wrap up here, Charles.
Mhm.
One, we talked a little bit about this earlier when we were speaking about the profession that your mom and your sister are in. But the question I have, and the reason I ask this is because oftentimes, particularly in communities of color, there are so many things that go unsaid, and oftentimes we don't know where someone's at until it's too late. So the question I have for you is how would folks around you have known that you were struggling in your darkest days without you telling them explicitly that you were struggling?
Um, Without me telling, well, the people around me, they will like pay attention to like just the legal issues. I think mine was kind of loud with the DUIs.
Sure.
But not so loudly. It was just, you know, how much I would drink, in a sitting when everyone else is just like relaxing drinking. And I would like go through, a 12 pack at the same time when somebody's drinking a few beers. And just,
Mm,
people watch that, just drinking that much. And just the frequency also, I would always get beer after work. It's like never fail. And I would get maybe drink like probably drink close to a 6 pack to a 12 pack after work. And so those were like signs too that a person need to drink that much, after work. The average person they may drink a beer or two, but I would buy the big beers and drink six of those. But just the
Mm.
amount, the frequency, how much I was drinking.
Yeah. I mean, that is a clear telltale sign is, when someone is just, and you always hear the excuse, well, they got a high tolerance. I got a high tolerance. It don't really matter. I mean, if you're drinking that much, like I was
Yeah.
telling you before, I was drinking, a couple bottles of wine, on the weekends a night, at least one bottle or maybe a little more, a night during the weekday. And, that's just not normal. You know what I
No.
mean? It's just not normal. So I hear you on that. Last question I have for you, man, is, for someone who's sitting there, who's listening to this, and, they feel as though that, maybe they have a problem, maybe they're curious about what sobriety could mean for them, but they don't know what the first step could be for them to take in that journey. What would you suggest to that person?
For me, I would say the first step is like to reach out. If you have a close friend that's going to hold you, that's going to be honest with you and tell you what they think. And I mean, it has to be it can't be someone who's partying and drinking with you because they're going to be like, nah, you don't have a problem. But you really have to talk to someone who's
Right.
going to be honest. And, and that may be, just calling a professional place and be like, hey, I'm, thinking about, quitting drinking. And, they're going to ask you how much you drink. And you have to be totally honest with them as well. And they're going to ask you all kind of questions about, does this particular incident happen when you're drinking or, because you have to, because most people, they will compare their drinking to people around them. And if they see a lot of people drinking, without consequence, then they feel like, okay, well, I drink the same amount they drink, but they don't think about, you getting DUIs or, you having relationship problems. But yeah, it's always good to talk to someone, that's going to be honest with you, whether it's a professional or a friend that you trust before decide that you're going to stop, but always reach out to someone.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate it. And that in itself is, can be challenging for people who are,
It
who
is.
are under the substance, but that's what this is all about is, trying to, take those challenges head on and, step into that discomfort, and that could be the first step to, a brighter day. So I appreciate you sharing that, Charles. Last question, where can folks find you, to follow you, to see what you're up to these days? I want to make sure that, we don't leave this episode without making that connection.
Okay. Well, they can always look up Charles S. Harrison Jr. on Instagram, or you can just type in at SoberFit Dad. I think I pretty much taken that name because you can Google it now, and I think I come up on it. It'll show my
Okay.
Instagram, it'll show my YouTube, and probably show Facebook too. So at SoberFit Dad, if you Google it, it's gonna come up.
Cool. Well, Charles, look, man, I really do appreciate you to coming in and spending some time with us on the show. It's a special one for me being 25. I told you initially I
Congratulations.
wasn't when we first started doing this, I just didn't know if I was going to get it this far, but I'm really happy that I'm being able to monument that this time with you. So appreciate you, man. I will definitely stay in touch. I'll shoot you some notes after the show. And everything that we chatted about will be in the show notes. So thank you for providing those resources to our listener, man.
Thank you for having me on.
Okay. That's all. That's it for the show.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Stacking Days podcast. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, email me at rdg@stackingdays.com or follow us on Instagram at stackingdays. If you like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, and by all means share it with a friend who you think needs to be invited into the conversation. Until we meet again, be well, one day at a time.